I'm the Director of Career Services. My name is Bradley Merritt. I'm in the other building, so if you ever need help or advice or thinking about your career, I'm the guy. So please make sure to stop by, see me, and so we can work on that. Other than that, I am going to turn it over to you guys to go through the panel. This is very exciting, and we got a lot of leaders in this industry, so it's going to be a great time. So.
We're happy to have you all here. My name is Lynn Quimby-Pennock. I am an administrative law judge with the Florida Division of Administrative Hearings located in Tallahassee, Florida. I had a lovely drive down this afternoon. It really wasn't pretty. No fall foliage, but at least it wasn't raining cats and dogs, which is a positive as far as I'm concerned. I am the co-chair of the committee that works with law school liaison stuff for the Florida Bar Administrative Law Section, and these are volunteers who have given up part of their, this is Tuesday afternoon, to join us here and give us a little bit of information just as to how, I put them on the spot, or I told them last week, and I said it's informal. If y'all have questions that you want to bounce off of us, please do that. We're here to answer questions. But it's on administrative law. If you haven't taken an administrative law class, you need to, because it's an exciting area of the law. You would be surprised at how involved it gets. I hear anywhere from probably, I don't even want to guess, a number of cases ranging from anything from licensure discipline to exemption type cases to school board teacher discipline to pharmacists, doctors, a wide range. Adoptions, those have been real difficult at times, but I do hear those. I went to an out-of-state law school. I went to Walter F. George School of Law in Macon, Georgia. I graduated in Luton. Since I've been an administrative law judge for a little over 5 years now, and I can promise you that even before I was an administrative law judge, I never had 2 days of work that were the same, because administrative law goes all over the board, and once you get it, whether it's in the federal arena or in the state arena, it can provide an exciting and challenging event. I asked my panelists, or I told them last week, that I would like them first, I'm going to introduce them and then ask them to give a little bit as to where their background was, how they got to where they are, and then where they may be or hope to be in 5 to 10 years. One of my panelists said that in 10 years they hope to be on the beach. And that's fine. That's a good place to be if that's where you want to be, which I find that very exciting after an interesting and fulfilling career. So to my immediate right, I have Allison McDonald. She is the Deputy Chief Attorney for the Division of Real Estate, which is associated with the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, unless they changed that recently. Good. We're good. Next to her is Jennifer, and I don't know if you use the hyphenated name like I do.
Oh, I go by Blakeman.
Okay.
Lozano's my married name.
There you go.
There we go.
She is an Assistant General Counsel with the Office of Financial Regulation here in Orlando. I didn't know OFR had.
They do?
Had a presence here in Orlando. Okay. That's different. Okay. To her immediate right is Zach Lombardo, who is with the private law firm of Bryant, Miller & Olive. And he's located in the Tampa office, although it's my understanding he graciously came over to Orlando and worked today, which we appreciate you coming in. And then on Zach's right is Jed Berman, who is with Infantino and Berman.
Good enough.
It's not my strong suit. And he's also in private practice. We have another panelist who works for the state, I believe, and she is not able to get here until maybe 5:30 this afternoon. So when Lenita comes in, we will certainly recognize her as well. But let me turn first to Jennifer and ask if you can just give a little bit of background. That would be great.
Yes. Well, as you said, my name is Jennifer Blakeman. I work for the Florida Office of Financial Regulation. It's, if you go right down Colonial Drive, it's actually across from the FAMU Law School, near that same courtyard. And I have to say, any statements I make today express my own views They do not reflect the perspective or views of the Office of Financial Regulation. And my comments are not reflective of my office's position on any matter discussed. Kind of a little bit how I came to law school. Well, I knew from the time I was a little girl that I wanted to be a lawyer. I loved debating. Instead of playing house with my friends, we'd play mock courtrooms. I just always knew. I'm kidding, this is a pile of whatever. I graduated from college and had no idea what I wanted to do. I was like, oh, let me take the LSATs, and did well in them, so I ended up going to law school. And I would say a lot of things in my career have been kind of a happy accident. I did always enjoy arguing and debating. I'm sure, you know, some people like litigation, some like transactional. Administrative law can cover both of those. But I always did like to argue, first with my dad, now with my husband, but that's okay. So when I was in law school, I knew I wanted to go in litigation. And I thought, when I got out, let me try the most exciting area of litigation I can think of, and I went into death penalty appeals, later criminal law. Well, I got to do the litigation I enjoyed, I got to go to trial, I got to do depositions, and I also had trouble sleeping at night. These cases were just like, oh my God, it's, you know, people can go to jail. I did family law for a while after that, and I gave all my clients my cell phone number, and they would use it. They would call me at 5 p.m., 9 p.m., 3 a.m. They'd ask questions like, their ex was 5 minutes late dropping a child off. Can they take them to court and sue? No. So I did that for about 6 years, and I was thinking, you know, how do I keep on doing the litigation I enjoy, but where I can actually sleep through the night? And through another happy accident in my career, in 2008, I began working for the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, this division of real estate. Actually, Allison was one of my first coworkers. And the job was...
Didn't know that.
Yes, we did. We worked together for about 5 years. And I found that job was, you know, just the right fit for me. I got to still go to hearings, do trials, depositions, all the good stuff, still fight with opposing counsel. But the cases were, you know, a little bit different. The good thing about administrative law, you can practice in so many different areas. I did real estate. In 2013, I switched over to the Office of Financial Regulation, and now I deal more with money services businesses, some mortgage. I'm more of a litigation attorney, so I do get to go to trial. And where I see myself in 5 or 10 years, hopefully still practicing in this field. Fingers crossed.
Allison, ladies first. Sorry, gentlemen.
I was at University of Florida. My plans as an undergrad was to go and get my PhD in ancient Bronze Age Greek art. And the very last semester, much to my parents' chagrin, of my last year, I took a class called Museum Studies, and one of the professors came over from the law school and started talking about cultural patrimony and the UNESCO treaty and what all is involved with carting priceless pieces of ancient artifacts around the country to be showed in museums. So I instantly became fascinated with the law, was never something that I had considered, and subsequently went to law school. When I was in law school, I learned that I enjoyed litigation much more than transactional work. It was more exciting to me. I enjoyed all of the complex theories and presenting cases. When I got out of law school, I joined the insurance defense sector and went to work as in-house counsel for some insurance companies. I enjoyed that work very much. The insurance company that I worked for was small, therefore we got to touch all kinds of different files. We represented the company on certain cases. We did examinations under oath of folks that were involved in accidents. We did legal opinions as well as trial work. As much as I enjoyed that area of law, along came my beautiful children. And I found that working 60, 65, sometimes hours a week was just not conducive to what I was looking for at that point in time. I was looking to scale back on some hours. With litigation, I found that in that particular arena, you're either all in or all out. So I looked for something that would meet more of my schedule, and lo and behold, I saw an advertisement, I think it was in the Florida Bar News, for the opening of the Division of Real Estate. Happily, I applied, happily, I was accepted, and started to work for the division. The Division of Real Estate is located across the street, also in FAMU. Jennifer's in one of the buildings, I'm in one of the other buildings. I started out as Assistant General Counsel, prosecuting license law violations for appraisers, real estate agents, and brokers. And then a few years ago, I accepted the Deputy Chief Attorney position. I do mostly work on the appraiser side. To me, it's very fascinating. The appraisers are dually regulated, both in terms of state law and federal law. So I have a nice mix in my practice of elements of both. We do go to trial, and I can practice trial work. It's very interesting work, and I can be a mother to my children. So in 5 to 10 years, where do I see myself? I'd like to be exactly where I still am.
I should have said at the beginning, we understand that y'all have your different class schedules, and if anybody needs to leave, we will not be offended if you get up and leave, but I will take your name, so I assume. I'm kidding. We understand y'all have a busy schedule, and it's a unique schedule, so please, if there is pizza up here if you want that. Zach, can you step to the plate, sir?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Zach Lombardo. I'm what you might term a baby lawyer. I've been practicing for exactly 1 year and 40 days, although one of those years was a leap year, so I feel like, you know, I'm doing okay, 405 days. So, I like your story about how you sort of got distracted in one of your classes and then ended up going to law school, because I had a very similar experience. I was pursuing sort of a different route, and then I ended up taking this class, and a small part of the class had to do with copyright law. And I just sort of remembered that I loved rules. I love them. And so and then I accidentally took a legal environment of business class, and then I realized that nothing brings me more joy than reading judicial opinions. That was pretty much it. So I went to law school, and now I am a baby lawyer. I am in private practice. I'm primarily a litigator, and in one of the arenas that I litigated in is before the department, the Division of Administrative Hearings at DOA. So my experience with administrative law is almost exclusively as a litigator, fighting before the judges on various cases. So that's kind of what I can talk about. As far as where I see myself in 5 years, I have no idea. I am really excited to be here, and I'm excited, and by here I mean as a lawyer. And so I just hope to, still be a lawyer in 5 years. And I'm excited to be here as well. I mean, I just meant yeah, right. Words. I don't know. So I just hope to be, I would like to in 5 years look at things and be like, I know what's going on here. Because right now, it's just, there's a lot of information. Law school is certainly a fire hose-like experience. Wait till your first day of practice. It is a totally different world. It is a huge amount of information to ingest. And just when you think you know anything, there's like a huge mountain of stuff that you didn't even realize that you need to think about learning. So I'm just excited to have any grasp on it. But I'm really having a great time, and I'm excited to talk to you guys. And I'm excited to be here in this room with you.
Excellent. Thank you. Jeff.
Okay, so I guess if he's a baby lawyer, then I'm the grandfather lawyer. But I accept that position, and as the judge said early on, yeah, I'm the one that, I think I said 5 years, and not 10 years. I'm hoping only 5. But if I have to stretch it out a little longer, then I'm happy to do it. I guess one of the nice things about being a lawyer is you can just keep doing it for as long as you want to do it. And I am 72, so I will tell you that maybe I don't work as many hours, certainly no 60 hours a week, but at least you can still get up and drive down to the office, and I think I can still do a decent job. So you can look forward, if you want, to a really, really long career as attorneys. to set the record straight, when Jeb Bush was governor, my name, which is actually Jed, became Jeb. So I don't know if the typographical errors, but that's how that wound up. But that's fine. Yeah, I don't see anybody in here that really remembers the 60s. So to tell you motivation for going to law school, back in the 60s with the Vietnam War going on, that was the greatest motivation to go to graduate school for anybody. And the longer that the course took, and the closer you got to 26, and without really doing anything to avoid the draft, then certainly you would do it. I had no desire to go to medical school for 7 years, and getting a master's degree only took 2 years, so that wasn't quite long enough. And as a result, law school just fit in 3 years to be just enough for what I needed. Also back then, the most exclusive law school in the world was the Judge Advocate General's Corps. If you graduated from law school in the 60s, the first application you made was to get into JAG. And I mean to tell you, you had to be tops in your class, and you had to be going to the right law school in order to get into JAG. I, for one, went into private practice. I will tell you in a moment what I do. It's nice to see attorneys who are on the other side. But back, thanks to now Senator Bill Nelson, back in the 80s, he was the insurance commissioner. And at that time, for whatever reason, whether it was really for public service or I'm not sure what else, but Bill Nelson and the Department of Financial Services went to almost every insurance agency to investigate the agents and what they were doing. From my perspective, as it happened, I represented a chain of about 50 insurance agencies. And when Bill Nelson literally went into one of the agencies and the agent did not recognize him, but when he walked out, he found that he not only had his minimum PD insurance, but he had been sold a motor club and he had been sold a hospital indemnity policy and whatever else. So, of course, the Department of Financial Services accused this particular agent of what's known as sliding, where an insurance agent will not only sell you what you asked for, but when you leave, you've got a lot of other products. And this was, not that it was easy or should have been done, but it wasn't that difficult because many people then wanted to get their mandatory PIP PD so that they could get their license and registration renewed. Well, unfortunately for insurance agents, the commission on selling a PIP PD policy would not keep the office open. So they certainly were encouraged to sell additional products that paid very, very high commissions. And as a result of representing really innumerable insurance agents in cases involving the Department of Financial Services, which ultimately, if you have a disputed issue of material fact, you're entitled to have a trial before a judge like our judge here at DOA. So I wound up representing a lot of insurance agents, became general counsel for a trade group which expanded at least my clientele to even more agents, and had a lot of experience in that litigation field. Counsel also mentioned over here other fields that lawyers can get into. Of course, I wanted to be in litigation, and in my career, I've done some criminal defense, and I do and still do a lot of domestic, and of course a lot of administrative matters. If you're looking to do some litigation that is rewarding, that is novel, that is also demanding, but that you don't want to perhaps be in front of juries, or you don't want to have the, as counsel said, the late night call that he dropped the child off 5 minutes late, can I sue him, the domestic matters, then administrative law is really a terrific area to get into. It is one that has a lot of opportunity. I represent real estate agents who may be prosecuted. I represent insurance agents. Basically what I do is disciplinary matters. And that's only one of the areas of administrative law. We have other matters, for example, rule challenges, where a client may be in an industry that has some rules that they are either unhappy with, they can't meet, or are proposed rules. And you have an opportunity to challenge those rules, again, before an administrative law judge at DOA. And, you know, there frankly are many, many, many other areas of administrative law. I don't know what administrative law courses are available. When I went to law school, there were that many. And administrative law was really an infant. I don't even think that Florida had its Administrative Procedures Act back in the 60s. So it was one of those things that it has developed, and frankly, this is an opportunity for people who get into this area, whether even as a legislative assistant or perhaps somebody in the legislature, that the Administrative Procedures Act is constantly being revised and amended. But short of that, there are just lots of opportunities in administrative law. So 5 years come from now, and I'll be on the beach, and I'll be looking forward to reading some reports from all of you people who are then representing people in front of DILA and other places.
Thank you. We'll open it up for any questions that you may have. I want to point out that not only is there state administrative law, but you also have local, county, city government law that uses the Administrative Procedure Act, as well as federal. If you think Social Security runs on statutes alone, you're sadly mistaken. There are lots of rules on the federal level, not only in the Social Security arena, but in the Department of Education, special education type cases come over to DOA as well. But are there questions that y'all have that one of these panelists may have observed or experienced, or maybe can give you some pointers on? We're here to tell you that the Florida Bar has a lot of opportunities for you once you finish school. Once you graduate and become a member of the bar, you have the ability to join, I think it's 3 different sections of the bar for free for the first year after you graduate or after you become a member of the bar. And we'd like you to consider joining the Administrative Procedures section, I should say the administrative section, simply because it's a way for you to start networking. Networking, as you've probably heard, even if you're just a 1L, is very important. You need to go out, you need to meet and greet. If the opportunity presents itself, go to these functions. You've got the Orange County Bar is here, the Seminole County Bar, there's a Florida Association of Women Lawyers, but all of these areas are good places to network, and that's what you want to do. A piece of advice that I would give each and every one of you is, if you do get involved and you volunteer for something, make sure that you follow through. Because if you don't follow through, then you're going to start down a path that people, well, they said they would do X, and when it came time, X hadn't been done, and either the person who was chairing that event had to pick up the slack and do X, or had to find somebody else who could step in and do it rather quickly. So that's really my pearls of wisdom. But surely with 20 law students in this classroom, somebody has a question. No questions? Come on. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm interested in immigration law. I haven't taken administrative law. I wish I had that opportunity to take that class. But I know that it's very linked with immigration law. There's a lot involved. So if any of you can help me.
That's a federal area.
Yes.
And it's intense. It's pretty much what I can tell you. Anybody know more about it than I do?
My only experience, this was years ago, I worked one summer in law school with I think it was the Department of Justice Executive Office of Immigration Review. And what I remember, my job there it was an internship working for a judge, and he would have to write orders whether or not to grant someone asylum, and my job was to listen to the recordings of the testimony and give him, help him draft the orders. So, that's just the most I saw of it, but I do remember it was pretty interesting once you got into some of the facts of the cases.
You may want to look into seeing if there may be an internship or an externship. I don't know which one is which. An externship, you get credit, or the internship, you get credit. One of them, it's beyond mine. But looking into that, I saw another hand over there as well. Yes, ma'am.
I just had a question. As a mother, which area, I know it's vast, but where do you recommend us maybe focusing on as an entry-level attorney, possibly?
I think administrative law is a great place to start. When I was looking for part-time work, on the East Coast, all the way up to New York and beyond, the part-time opportunities really stopped around the Carolinas, and the further south to Carolinas to Georgia to Florida, there just were no part-time attorney positions in litigation that I could find. So that certainly may have changed. That may be something for you to look into as well.
And something else to say, not that I'm trying to push you to the government side as opposed to the private side, but I'm a mother of an 8-year-old, and I've been working for the government for 6 years. Probably the primary reason is the fantastic benefits. You have health insurance for your whole family. If I have to take my kid to the doctor, you have a lot of sick leave to use. Annual leave, it's never an issue. The people in my office, you know, they're all hardworking, but a lot of them have families, and it's nice to, you know, not worry that your job won't get done if somebody gets sick or if you have to meet with your child's teacher. That is nice.
Yes, ma'am.
I know in the private sector, they have like internships or where you can intern, and that's a good way of networking and building a reputation and bringing you on if they like your work ethic. Is there something similar to that in the government sector?
Yes.
There is. The Department of Business and Professional Regulations does take on law clerks, so that's something perhaps to look into. I think the judges in all of the circuits do additionally take law clerks, so that may introduce you to the civil side or the administrative side, depending on what you were interested in as well.
DOA has, and again, I don't know whether you call them interns or externs, but we generally have students, law students, I think they're primarily third-year law students, come in for a semester, and they will sit in on cases. They will draft certain orders that they can draft based on what they have heard. The responsibility still remains with us to finalize those, and but it's valuable experience. You may be able to go on what's called People's First, which is the state of Florida's job website is called People's First. I think if you just plug that in, it's going to pop up. And there will be opportunities. These are paid opportunities. They may list, I haven't looked at it in a while, but they may list part-time positions, and depending upon what your schedule is, you may or may not be able to work something there. But again, if you can't do that, I don't know whether Barry has a volunteer hours.
Yeah, we have 50 hours of pro bono that's
Okay.
required, and that would probably qualify for it.
It would.
Definitely would.
Before I became an administrative law judge, I am a member of the Tallahassee Women Lawyers Association as well, and I had a mentee, and fortunately we were having lunch one day at a restaurant, and in walks a general counsel whom I've known for several years, and the gentleman knew more about the volunteer hours that FSU required. I had no idea about it. And he sat down with us and chatted with this young lady for a good part of the lunch hour. And after he finished chatting, he asked me, he said, would you please have her send me her resume? Well, it turns out she sent him her resume, and he took her on and she did all of the hours that she needed to do, and she did such a good job that when she graduated, where did she start working? She started there and worked, I want to say, there for 1.5 years or so. And that's what I mean when you can get into an organization and start networking. It's a good thing because you're going to meet people who, you know, I may not have something for you, but I know somebody else may have something that might fit your schedule better. When I was a young mother, my children are a little bit older now, but I enjoyed government service because it did facilitate taking the kids to doctor's appointments, or did facilitate going to the parent-teacher conferences that you don't really want to go to, but golly, yes, we need to go. So, other questions? Don't be shy, it's okay. Yes, sir.
If I can, I just wanted to mention, I actually practiced administrative law here in the state of Florida. I'm here locally. I went to Barry 6 years ago. And I did not plan to go into administrative law. But because of my own background, some of the things I used to do were regulated by the state of Florida. And so basically, if you're involved in, let's say, insurance, the environment, real estate, whatever, the list of things that administrative law covers is unbelievable. It's stuff you probably never even thought of. And so I'm in private practice. I've made the choice also to go all over the state of Florida. So in essence, what you're doing if you're in private practices, you're representing either individuals or businesses against the state. In my case, it's usually licensing violations. And while it isn't the high drama or the phone calls with, let's say, capital cases, and I'm very glad it's not, the most drama I wanted to deal with was family, and I decided not to do that anymore, but that's another story, as they say. Really, when you're representing businesses, both big and small, literally from anywhere from a few $1,000s to millions of dollars can be at stake. And basically, people's businesses and livelihoods can hang in the balance for a variety of reasons. So while generally administrative law does not make TV shows, it really can be very rewarding, because when you win, when you're successful for your client, you know you've really helped somebody out to the tune of often quite a bit of money, really. And so while it's not like criminal or family or divorce or whatever, there's really more to it than you could ever imagine. And I know it's a cliche that each day is different, but it's different to a degree that there's no way I could even explain it to you and you'd believe me. So really, it's something which a lot of people never consider. I sort of fell into it, and people often fall into things. But really, it's something that's really worth considering.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you all do any litigation in terms of healthcare law, nursing licensures, or I heard you say something about doctors, but anything with nursing or anything like that? No.
Well, as it happens, yes, we represent nurses, we represent doctors. If the Department of Health or some other organization, frankly, it seems chiropractors are quite a target. When you get into administrative law, all of a sudden you find out there are so many boards in the state of Florida that you can't really, I'm stunned every time I look on any of the departments, and all of a sudden there's a board of acupuncture and a board of chiropractic and whatever else. So there are quite a few people out there who are licensed, and all of those type cases, if you're talking about a disciplinary case, for example, against a chiropractor or against a nurse or whomever else, you're going to wind up most likely, depending upon whether the facts are admitted or whether there is a dispute, you're probably going to ultimately end up before one of these boards. Or in fact, with real estate, often you wind up in front of the Real Estate Commission. When you get there, it is more like arguing to a jury than it is arguing to a judge, because it's collegial. There are 5 members or 7 members, whatever it is, as opposed to a case where you would go to the Department or the Division of Administrative Hearings, where you're going to deal with a judge, just like a domestic case if you're in circuit court, or any other type of civil case where you're in court and there's a non-jury trial. So you do get a variety of sort of jury trials if you have a board that you're in front of, and non-jury trials if you go to DOA. When you have a case like, against a doctor or a nurse, there's going to be, most likely the Department of Business and Professional Regulation is going to file an administrative complaint against a person. They're accused of not keeping appropriate records of examinations, for example. There are different procedures that each one of these boards follow. And a lot depends on, how high up in the I guess, the government hierarchy is it. When you're dealing, for example, with the Department of Financial Services, it has its own legal division. So if an insurance agent is accused of doing something inappropriate, there will be an investigator, really like a sheriff or a police. They have lots of authority to issue subpoenas, etc. They're going to do an investigation, but they're not going to decide on whether they want to charge anybody with a violation. That then goes to the legal department or legal division. At that point, whether it's the Department of Financial Services or whether it's DBPR, some attorney does make a decision as to whether they want to file an administrative complaint. And at that point, it gets filed against your doctor or your nurse or realtor or insurance agent. They come to you and they go, well, what do we do now? Of course, you look at it and decide, and by the way, there are very, very few emergency suspension orders that get issued. If somebody has done something egregious, and if it is conceivable that it's going to be recurring, then an agency that issues the licensure for that particular profession can actually issue an emergency order. To tell you the truth, in 40 years of doing this, I've had one. So it is really an unusual thing to happen. And generally speaking, you can make a pretty good argument against it and possibly get that set aside quite quickly, unless you're dealing with a real crook out there. And there are some licensees who are. But in the absence of that, you now have your nurse or your chiropractor or doctor who's got this administrative complaint, and you decide whether there are disputed issues of fact, or whether you're entitled to or need an informal hearing where basically you're throwing yourself on the mercy of a board, the Real Estate Commission, or the Department of Health or the Board of Chiropractic or whatever the case might be. But now you're going to find yourself in the position of, what do I do? How do I get ready for this? And now you're really having to do everything that an attorney is doing if they're in any litigation. You may well engage in discovery, submitting requests for admission. Well, that's not done that often, but certainly you're going to submit some interrogatories, written questions, and most likely take some depositions of potential witnesses that are against your client in order to find out what they're going to say, and also to get them locked into, this is what their answer is going to be on this question, and if I ask them a different question at that hearing, they better answer the same thing, otherwise I'll have an opportunity to impeach them. So you're going to be doing everything that a lawyer does, whether you're in circuit court or whether you're in front of the Department or the Division of Administrative Hearings, or in some cases even in front of the Real Estate Commission. And then, of course, you've got to prepare your argument, just as you would in any other case. So when you're dealing with a nurse or when you're dealing with a doctor, ultimately you've got to put your best foot forward, your client's best foot forward, and hopefully convince this board that whatever they said, keeping inadequate records, doing whatever else may have been inappropriate, that it either didn't occur, or for these reasons, whatever the discipline is, should be less than a suspension. And keep in mind, there is another board that some people may ultimately have to go in front of, and that's the Florida Bar. I mean, as members of the bar, your discipline is subject to whatever the bar decides. If you do something inappropriate, fortunately, we in the bar, we have a little bit different methodology before ultimately charges are filed. There is going to be most likely a probable cause hearing where you generally don't get an opportunity to present your case, but at least some member of the bar will have looked at what happened and decide whether there really needs to be anything done. It then goes to the legal department in the Florida Bar, and somebody there decides whether a grievance is going to be filed against you, and then ultimately you're entitled to a trial before an appointed hearing officer. And at that point, you're really doing the same thing that would happen in DOA, presenting your case and your argument, and hoping that either the allegations against you are disproved, or that whatever discipline is going to come down is going to be not the guillotine, not a disbarment, and I'm sure none of you are going to have anything like that happen to you. Nevertheless, we do represent attorneys who ultimately have problems with the Florida Bar. As it happens with the bar, the final decider about what happens is the Supreme Court. And actually, in the advance sheet I saw today, I'm not sure if you were familiar with the attorneys who were representing Bubba the Love Sponge on a horrendous lawsuit that had gone on for years against some other disc jockey over in the Tampa area. I mean, maybe you're more familiar there. And while I heard on the news about how the lawyers who represented Bubba in this case were disciplined for doing horrible things, when you read what they did, it was even worse than what the paper had reported. Apparently what happened was one of the lawyers representing the disc jockey who was suing, or was being sued by Bubba the Love Sponge, and they're already in trial. After one day in court, he goes to a restaurant in Tampa. Well, as it turns out, a paralegal in the attorney who is representing Bubba sees him and recognizes him. Of course, he doesn't recognize her. She calls up her boss and she goes, "Guess who's here?" And he's having a few drinks. So this guy goes, "Well, I'm going to call my buddy Sergeant Fernandez of the Tampa Police and advise him that potentially this attorney is going to be drinking and is going to be driving." Well, unbeknownst to him, the poor attorney lived close to the restaurant, and he didn't drive there, and he didn't intend to drive. He intended to walk home. Well, when the paralegal heard this, she goes, "Oh, no," and she starts buying drinks for the attorney. And she's flirting with him, and I guess he's buying drinks for her. And then he goes, "Well, I guess I'm ready to go home. I'm going to walk home." She goes, "Oh, no, I need to get my car." So he was being very gallant. And he said, "I don't think you ought to be driving because you've had too much to drink. Why don't you leave your car here and I'll get you a cab?" "Oh, no, 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 no. I don't want a cab. I don't want to leave my car here." So this poor lawyer goes out and gets the valet. They get this paralegal's car, pull it up front, and the lawyer even says to the valet, "Can we leave the car here overnight?" "Oh, yeah, we can leave it overnight and get it in the morning." The paralegal apparently said, "That's still not good enough. I need to go home." So that's when the poor lawyer says, "Okay, I'll drive you home." Sergeant Fernandez calls officer somebody else in the Tampa Police. As soon as the guy drives the car, they pull him over, and he gets the DUI. But not only that, these lawyers that did this setup, apparently this poor lawyer gets arrested. Well, he had his briefcase from the trial, and it's in the paralegal's car. The paralegal, now, of course, they drive her car home, somebody does, and the lawyers kept this guy's briefcase for another day.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes. I didn't read the entire report as to whether they went through the briefcase. I didn't do that. But the Supreme Court opinion that disbarred these guys permanently starts off with, this is one of the most egregious cases of attorney misconduct that we have ever seen. So, anyway, that was the end of the Bubba the Love Sponge story. And of course, the trial it was a mistrial. The guy was in jail, he couldn't appear. And needless to say, the attorneys represented Bubba all had been disbarred. And what they did was they said, well, let's not make this a permanent disbarment, because with the Florida bar, you in fact can be disbarred for life. And they said, we just want the regular disbarment, which I think is 5 years when you can reapply. But the Supreme Court said, no, not in this case. They were permanently disbarred.
The one thing I would say is, if you ever get a letter from the Florida bar, respond quickly. Respond to it. Don't sit it on your coffee table and let it sit there for weeks. Bad choice. Bad choice. Just respond. The last panelist arrived. I'm very happy that Lydia Shorter was able to get through traffic and join us. If you would very quickly go through how you ended up going to law school and where you are now and where you hope to be in 5 or 10 years.
Okay, so I am a native of Orlando, one of these rare creatures, and just always had a passion for law. I went to college in the early 90s, so in the 90s there were so many different things that were going on, and I was really interested in it, so it piqued my interest that I'm going to go to law school. So I went to undergrad at Howard, came back to Florida, and said I'm going to go to college in Florida. Went to University of Florida in Gainesville, and loved the law. I still do. I was a former prosecutor. I was a prosecutor in the 9th Judicial Circuit here for a number of years, Orange and Osceola County. I did from misdemeanors, juveniles to felony. I also worked for the Department of Children and Families. I was a solo for a number of years, and now I work at the firm DeVoe Knight Simmons Law Firm. One of the things that kind of piqued my interest about administrative law, even though you think you're doing criminal or you're doing family, you're like, well, how does that come into play? Well, one of the things, especially in juvenile, you notice there are a lot of children who get expelled from school or suspended. Well, that's a whole nother procedure to appeal those expulsions from school. So someone has to do that. a lot of parents, some kids were expelled or suspended for a variety of reasons, and some were warranted and some weren't. Also, when I was doing criminal law, especially in county court, when you have DUIs, you have a lot of driver's license suspensions. So that's not handled in the criminal court from a DUI. There's an administrative hearing to try to get a license that you can go to work, a work-only license, but all of those things are handled outside of the criminal court in administrative law. So you think sometimes, well, I don't really have any use for it, I don't think I'm going to use it, but you will find that there are lots of different ways that administrative law just kind of plays into other areas. And so I think that depending on what you decide to do, you may find that your practice area may cross into administrative law and you didn't even think that it would. And so that's kind of how I got interested, because I would have little, they'll say, well, we need, especially when I was a prosecutor, well, my client wants to get their license reinstated. Well, great, but I have nothing to do with the part where their license was suspended because they refused to do a breathalyzer. In the state of Florida, if you don't do a breathalyzer, your license is automatically suspended. So, from there, you can go through a process to get a work-only driver's license, but that's not done in criminal court. It's done in administrative hearing.
Where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years?
In 5 to 10 years,
Put you on the spot.
Oh my goodness, where do I want to be? That's a good one. I think within the next 5 to 10 years, I would maybe like to be practicing full-time in administrative law. Right now, I just do little things here or there, so it's not fully an administrative law position, but I do get a little bit of taste of a lot of different things. And I think once you get that taste, as I said, I've been doing a variety of different things, it really piques your interest to say, I think this is an area that I wouldn't mind doing full time. And it's an area that has so many different practices that you actually have to figure out, but what area of administrative law do I want to practice in? And that's something, I didn't have the exposure when I was in law school, so I think these are great events that we're having so that law students can think about it, like, oh, maybe this is an area that I may want to go into. Maybe I should take administrative law class now while I'm in law school so I can get exposed to the area, and that's something that totally I missed when I was in school. So you'll be 5 years ahead of where I am just by coming to this because I didn't have that exposure when I was in law school.
I think just to comment, one thing that's really interesting about administrative law is there's so many, I hope I don't butcher this word, little niche areas that I've seen people practice. When we were at the real estate division, there were a couple of private attorneys we'd see almost every board meeting, and handling real estate disciplinary cases was almost half their practice. And now that I'm at the Office of Financial Regulation, I see a different group of attorneys handling those kind of cases. Or you said, for example, you do mostly bid protests. So I don't know if I should admit this, but I think family and criminal, I've heard from friends that are in private practice, can get really crowded. Administrative, I think it's a little more specialized. Sometimes there's niche areas that are not as crowded or as explored.
Well, sometimes attorneys start out in, say, the Department of Health, and when you're in the Department of Health, you are assigned potentially the Board of Medicine, the Board of Nursing, Board of Pharmacy, and those areas. And you do exactly what people who go into the prosecution, criminal prosecution do. You get the experience in prosecuting those administrative areas. And then once you've had a lengthy time there so that you understand the law and you understand what the board is doing, you may then go to defense of the administrative practice. I did that at one point where I had worked with the Department of Health. I had a stopover in a different area. There is a 2-year, I don't know what you call it, a 2-year prohibition of practicing in front of the same board that you have been working with. I worked with the Board of Medicine for a long time. I then went into a different area. I went into the office of, I went over to DBPR in a totally different area, and I worked there for well over 2.5 years. And then I went into private practice, And when I went into private practice, I was able to immediately pick up cases that were Board of Medicine type or Board of Nursing types because my 2 years had expired. But I knew exactly how to represent those people in front of those various boards just from my exposure. After private practice, I worked in private practice for almost 3 years, I think, and just was never comfortable with it. I'm always pleased to hear when people are comfortable with private practice. And I went back into state government and enjoyed it immensely, and then had the opportunity to become an ALJ, and I'm thrilled to be there now. And hope to, this is my last stop. That is my last stop.
I do have one other thing. I have friends who practice federal administrative law, and they just kind of came into the Social Security. I mean, these are things, areas that, like I said, you will find that you know someone who has a Social Security disability issue. I also am a volunteer for the Veterans Pro Bono Consortium, where we do appellate stuff for disabled veterans, before the Veterans Board of Appeals. I mean, so you will find, as they were saying, that there's so many different areas that you don't even think about, not only on the state level, but also on the federal level as well. We do have some of those offices in Orlando. There's definitely a Social Security office here in Orlando, and then they have all of the different, I think there's Department of Real Estate. Yeah, so I think that's here, downtown, but there are different agencies, not only state, but also federal. So even if you think, oh, I don't want to work for necessarily a state agency, you may want to pursue federal opportunities as well. And those are, you know, just unlimited.
If I could jump on that real quick. And then the layer even below that would be the local government world, which is extremely more expansive than you might be thinking. There are 67 counties, 67 school boards, over 400 cities. There are a lot of local government things happening in the state, and some of they all interact with the Administrative Procedure Act in different ways. And we mentioned, she mentioned that I work a lot in the bid protest world. And I just wanted to plug that briefly because I think it's very different than it's very different than the licensure issue. It's not. This isn't really the licensure issue, and I only have one case where I experienced it, but it's a very sort of prosecutorial sort of experience. This is looks much more like a general civil dispute. It's basically evaluating the decision of a government, and whether that government be a state agency like the Florida Department of Transportation, or a county or a city. All of these entities have to, when they contract for services, they have to go to bid to find contractors. They can't just pick someone. And all of these contractors have an extremely vested interest in getting the bid. And it's usually a very small group of contractors, especially before FDOT. They do such massive projects that you have to be pre-qualified. So there are really only 6 or 7 contractors in the state that can afford to build FDOT projects. You need to be certified to do billion-dollar projects because it's a huge amount of money. And so when there's a huge amount of money, if the bid process goes wrong, you fight it. And so it's this very interesting world because the person you are fighting is the person who gives you all of your work. I'm in a bid protest right now, and the person who's protesting the bid gets 80% of their work from the agency that they are protesting the bid before. But they have to do this because this is how it works. And so it's a very interesting world. And it's the other interesting thing about it as compared to civil litigation, which I also do, is how much faster it is. Bid protests, bid protests are expedited because otherwise government would never be able to buy anything because people would just slow it down. Civil litigation can be very, very, very slow. Bid protests are so fast. I mean, I dare I use the word exciting. They are super exciting. The discovery turnarounds sometimes are 7 days. It is very, very fast, and you're going into that hearing in a way that oftentimes when people think about trials, they always think about surprise and drama, which in civil litigation, that's not real, right? You know everything before you go into that room. You have read every transcript. No one's going to say anything surprising. In a bid protest, you go into that hearing, and frankly, oftentimes you have no idea some of the facts. Because it's like, I was in one where the day before the hearing, they just dumped all the documents on us. So we're like, oh, here you go. And it's like, well, all right, so got to read all this. So it's a bid protests are a totally different animal. They're a very, very interesting animal because they're very complex, and you're often fighting about if you like math, big protests are for you. We one time spent 2 days arguing about 1/10 of a percentage point. So, but it was a $20 million contract. So, and there were some very big players involved. So it's a totally crazy world.
If I may too, compared to civil litigation, the rules of judicial administration for civil law say that 18 to 24 months is presumptively reasonable. In my section, when we file a case with DOA, you get a trial date in 75 days. So it's called the rocket docket in DOA. It's very quickly.
We're supposed to set hearings within 30 to 70 days of when a case is filed with us. And we try very diligently to get it there. That does not mean that we don't grant continuances should there be good cause, but it can't be, I have a hangnail and I can't do this. That's not going to get you in a continuance. It's got to have to be for a good reason, like we have 10 more experts that we want to depose, or we have X number of discovery out and things are still moving along. But we have measures that we are trying to get, and it's statutorily, set out that we have to do it in this amount of time. So we are close to the timing that y'all may need to move on to other questions or other classes, and I certainly want to thank y'all for coming, and I certainly want to thank my panelists for being here today.